I'm absolutely thrilled to have two guest speakers with us this afternoon. I'm just going to share a little bit about the context of our GTRSB communities within Rochdale and the schools that they attend. So I'm just going to share a little bit of information about that. Is that big enough? Can you all see that? Okay, so the agenda for this afternoon, I'm going to do a little introduction and I'm going to ask our guest speakers to do a little introduction. Then our guest speakers are going to talk us through the Pledge for Schools, and then at the end we're going to have a question and answers discussion. The Rochdale context. So we've got in our Rochdale schools 209 Gypsy, Traveller, Roma, Showman and Boater pupils from reception to year 11 on roll at a provision in Rochdale. So in reception we know of 15 GTRSB pupils, and 15 out of 15, 100% of those pupils are attending different schools or academies across the borough, which is absolutely fantastic. Year 1 to year 6, we have got 119 on roll at 37 different schools or academies. And at the secondary phase, year 7 to year 11, we've got 75 pupils on roll at 16 different schools or academies. And that also includes alternative provision settings as well. So the support that's available for maintained schools from the local authority for Gypsy, Traveller, Roma, Showman and Boater children and young people is we've got advice and guidance face-to-face or via email or telephone, training, language assessments, we've got classroom support and whole school approach. We've got various different projects that we like to run across the borough and linking schools so that they can work together on those projects. We've got support around attendance and inclusion. We've got home visits and family liaison, community outreach work, and supported admissions meetings. And the last two that I mentioned will be done by our new equality support officer, who is Janine Parry. So Janine started this week on Monday. She'll be working for 2 days a week, and she will be supporting with the family liaison, the community outreach work, home visits and the supported admissions meetings. We've got a similar package available for academies and academy trusts. So that's through our equality service level agreement, and that's available to purchase on Rochdale, Engage Rochdale. And that gives access to all of those services. So that's just a little bit of an overview of the context of our pupils in Rochdale. I'm going to hand over now to our guest speakers. So we are absolutely thrilled this afternoon to have Esther Stubbs and Emma Nuttall. And Esther and Emma are going to talk us through the GTRSB Pledge for Schools and how that can support us moving forward, because our schools already support these families really, really well. The provision in schools is really great, but we really, really want to learn how we can support these pupils and these families in a different way. So I'm really excited to hear about what we can do moving forward with the Gypsy, Traveller, Roma, Showman and Boaters Pledge for Schools. I'm going to hand over to Esther now.
Hi everyone, I'm Esther. I'm based at Buckinghamshire New University, where I work in collaboration with friends, families and travellers. So I'll let Emma, my colleague from FFT, introduce herself.
Yeah, my name's Emma Nuttall. I'm Youth Project and Policy Officer at Friends, Families and Travellers. And Friends, Families and Travellers is a national charity that works with gypsies and travellers. And I lead on the education policy work, and I work on youth projects and after school clubs as well. And part of that education remit is sitting on the Department for Education's Gypsy and Traveller stakeholder group. And yeah, and so I'm the kind of lead person on the Pledge for Schools, because we've got a working group which includes other Gypsy and Traveller charities, includes Buckinghamshire University, and yeah, we just kind of all work together to deliver the pledge. So I'll hand you back to Esther, who's going to take you through what the pledge contains.
Thanks, Emma. So there are two pledges. There's a schools pledge, there's also a higher education pledge. Today I'm going to talk to you a bit about the schools pledge, but if you want to know more, there's lots available online. I expect most of you are aware already of who the Gypsy, Roma, Traveller, Showman and Voter people are, but if you're not, there's just a little couple of sentences. There are different definitions and other people may have different ideas, but commonly the Gypsies are refer to English Romanese. There are also Scottish and Welsh Gypsies. Traveller often refers to someone typically of Irish heritage. Roma typically somebody who describes himself as Roma has typically migrated from Central or Eastern Europe. Showmen are generally travelling show people who earn their living as entertainers on travelling fun fairs and circuses. Boaters are traditionally water gypsies or bargees. They lived and worked on the waterways and canals. Nowadays, the vast majority, if not most people who I know anyhow, who have made boats their home, have done so as an alternative lifestyle choice. It's also important to remember that there are some new travellers who have adopted a nomadic way of life, in some cases for 2 to 3 generations. The confusing thing sometimes is that the term traveller is often used interchangeably. And as a Romani person myself, one of the things that we often say is, oh, GRT, GTRSB, who are we? But in fact, it's also widely accepted that the term traveller is used interchangeably, so it can sometimes get a bit confusing. I think what's helpful to remember, though, is that we are not one community. There are several different communities under the same umbrella term. And interestingly, in 2018, a YouGov poll revealed that 66% of people in the UK wrongly thought that GRT made up just one ethnic group. Another common myth is that not all travellers actually travel. 78% of GRT people are now settled. Research continues to identify challenges in planning policy that makes it more difficult to define who we are or provide enough sites, which means that we become settled, often through no choices of our own. And that also has an impact on the subsequent planning for sites of other generations. So I think it's really important to consider not just who is the community behind the term GTRSB, but also, is it a nomadic family? Let's not assume that because we use the term travellers that we travel. I've worked in traveller education service, and there has been a common misconception that when a traveller family arrive at the school, well, they won't be here very long. Well, actually, a lot of travellers are now settled. And I think it's really important to build relationships with families. Something that Lauren opened at the beginning of the meeting is how can we work better with families? And some of the conversations that I'm hearing more and more from teaching professionals is that what works for them in their schools is to really build relationships with their families, because behind each child is a family. And whilst the challenges are different from primary to secondary school, because you have less contact with families, relationships seem to be quite central to positive engagement. I'm sure most of you are aware that the term GTRSB is more a recent, it's been used much more recently than GRT, which has been around for a long time. Both terms can be contentious because there's a lot of identity politics in terms of who are we? We're all under this big term. Our data is aggregated. It hides our needs, it hides our strengths, and it hides who we really are. So I think it's important to understand who is the family behind the term GRT, GTRSB, or simply traveller family. Who are the family? What is their background? How do they describe themselves? GRT are legally recognised ethnic minorities and race, afforded protected characteristics in accordance with the Equalities Act. One of the challenges that I continue to work with is that showmen, although they are welcoming of the pledge now and accept that the pledge is a positive education initiative, they're really keen to be recognised in their own right and not as an ethnic minority or race. I think for me, when I started getting involved in the pledge, I feel that it matters, not just for education for children and young people in schools and staff who work in schools, but it also matters as a way of raising awareness about anti-Gypsyism to people who are perhaps not aware of some of the challenges that children and young people face in school, and families, because it's the families that come to school and collect their children. And if you're left, like my mother was, standing by herself, then you know, it creates a barrier to wanting to come to school. I think it's also important to think about the impact that anti-Gypsyism has for professionals and the GTRSB people. When I talk about the impact for professionals, I refer to my own experience of delivering some lectures in a local university, when I asked them about stereotypes of GTRSB people, and a lot of the stereotypes were really negative. And so if you're not familiar with the traveller families that you're going to work with, if you're only going off these common misconceptions, it might feel like quite a daunting place to be, quite a daunting task. The data, I realise, is really small, and I've cut and pasted it so that it is exactly as people have said it to me. Some of the responses were negative, very few were positive. Neutral. There were some neutral, very few positive, mostly negative. You may be familiar with some. Some of the positives: strong family community and look after each other. The home is immaculate, encourages acceptance and support, which I thought was really positive. Negative responses. So as a professional, if you're thinking, oh, well, this doesn't look good, these are the kinds of people that I'm going to work with, I think that's really sad, and it's sad for those families. I'm not suggesting that this is what you would take for truth, but it is a truth that these are the misconceptions that are out there, and these responses were collected just a year or so ago from students, undergraduate students who were studying to work in public services. So these kinds of ideas about the families behind those children that you teach is really negative. And I think that is what I mean when I refer to anti-Gypsyism, these negative ideals that are commonplace about us. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the pledge. I've given some context to why I think the pledge is important, why it matters in schools, why it matters in colleges, and why it matters for professionals to understand, what the pledge is. The pledge has four main pillars, if you like. There's an organisation and institutional behaviour, where I've tried to think about now, what does that actually mean? Because I've taken the wording from the website. And I think that having worked on the pledge now for a couple of years, I think that it really is about being professionally curious about the children that you're teaching, all children, not just traveller children, but all children, but particularly in relation to some of the common challenges and things that are written in research about why education is missed. I mean, absenteeism, isolation, social isolation. If children don't want to play with you because you're from a traveller family, that social isolation, get my words out, will have a real impact on wanting to come to school, and then later on absenteeism. So it's about being curious, really. Thinking about seating plans, again, if children are sat all by themselves, or they're not included in children's day-to-day activities. To be curious, that I kind of think about as being organisational and institutional behaviour, and also to really take the concerns from young people seriously. Whilst as an adult we can say, well, don't play with them, If they're not nice to you, don't play with them. To a small child, they're not able to understand that yet. I think that we need to be taking more seriously their worldview. Another pillar of the pledge is inclusion, celebration, and commemoration. And by that, commonly, lots of schools up and down the country, not just schools, lots of places, local councils, for example, celebrate GRT History Month. It would be really interesting if you would just pop in the chat if you're aware that June is GRT History Month, and lots of schools do some amazing work celebrating the commitment that GRT people make to society. And it's interesting around the country, different areas. So in Kent, they talk about hop picking, in East Anglia about farming. So it's really nice to celebrate GRT History Month and share stories with other schools, commemorating other things like Holocaust Memorial. It's important to try and neutralise some of the anti-Gypsy sentiment and negativity by celebrating and raising up these children and young people to have pride within themselves. But also by doing that, you are being inclusive. You're being inclusive to all those children who don't know anything about traveller families or traveller children, and they're hearing about it for the first time in a really positive and celebratory way. The third commitment is about data collection, which you probably do anyway. So it's really just how many students are there on roll? Is it increasing since you've undertaken the pledge? Some schools just show, they include on their website the pledge logo, which I think is a really good free way to say that you support traveller families, and traveller families will recognise that. They'll understand, oh, there's a school pledge. Oh, so I think that's a good thing to do. Outreach. Outreach is probably about relationships as well, I guess, which connecting with your local traveller services, which you're doing by being here today. Thank you for organising that, Lauren. And I'm finding that it's a really helpful way to connect with schools via traveller services, because they know the schools, they know which children the schools are in. So really just keeping those relationships going, I think, is a good way to continue outreach efforts. And outreach, I think, happens differently in schools. For universities, we talk about outreach in terms of connecting with feeder colleges. So moving forward in the future, that's sort of what I'd like to see. I'd like to see outreach being talking to local nurseries and preschools about which primary schools and then secondary schools. These are just some ideas for the future about outreach. But we have a schools working group. Emma and I just did a meeting earlier on in the week. You'd be welcome to come along and get involved if you want to. Commitment and working towards a welcoming and supportive environment where students feel empowered to thrive academically and personally. I appreciate that's a bit wordy, but I think that it's important that students, children, young people, their families, all feel that school is a welcoming environment, because what I hear, I don't know about you, Emma, but what I hear, and I heard it just today in another meeting before this one, is the intergenerational anxiety from parents handing over their children to school. They remember what it was like for them to go to school. It wasn't a very positive experience, and so they're almost anticipating it. And somehow this anxiety is then passed on. So I think it's really important to recognise that that's what families are saying. There is this intergenerational anxiety that their children will have a similar experience to the one they had, which wasn't very good. We ask schools that you will establish a named contact for students, both current and potential, also for families, which a lot of schools opt to do via their head teacher, but it's up to each school seems to do it differently. It's really important that you identify and publicise your support for students and future students, because I think that that does create a sense of belonging. It makes students feel seen and welcome in schools. I think that it's great. Sometimes we hear about these wonderful projects for traveller children, but I celebrate those, I do. I'd like to see them to be whole school approaches. For me, that's really inclusive. And I say this at meetings about the higher education pledge, where we don't see a huge amount of data. We know that travellers are some of the least likely to enter higher education. But actually, when you look much further and you talk to travellers about their experiences of schooling and of education generally, they're not identified in the data because they've identified elsewhere. I'm a Romani Gypsy, but I'm also white British. How I decide to identify on that day really follows me through my journey into university. So I think we have to be inclusive. We have to acknowledge that there are students and staff that are from traveller backgrounds that, for a variety of different reasons, probably due to anxiety of being rejected, which is really common, they don't say where they're from. So being inclusive is really the way to also not rely on the data, which sometimes doesn't include huge amounts of children and young people. It acknowledges those children and young people and staff who aren't confident in saying, oh, I'm from a traveller family. So I think it's important to be inclusive. Inclusivity, to me, I think, is one of the things that the pledge does really well. I think we need to support professional and personal development of staff members. There are some staff members in schools and universities, often who only say for the very first time about their background when talking to their colleagues. So they've been accepted into their role and they're doing really well, and suddenly for the first time they feel able to say who they are. I think it's a real positive to be able to develop those relationships and involve them in the pledge, involve them in working with students, because then they can have conversations with students about what do young people think. A lot of our work, Emma, I don't know if you agree, we work with lots and lots of adults about the pledge and what we think is good. It would be really, really good to get some voices of children and young people. A lot of this work you're probably doing already. You're probably already monitoring student and staff numbers, developing processes to identify who the students are and monitoring their progress. So really the pledge cements the hard work that you're doing already, and says, yes, I sign up to those commitments. I want to support traveller families in the local area. So signatory to the pledge is a public declaration by your education setting of its commitment to support and understand not just the challenges, but also the enablers, because sometimes it's easy to get carried away with what's challenging, what's difficult, what's a barrier. But actually there is lots and lots of really good professional work that happens up and down the country that enables children and young people and their families to remain engaged with education, to be engaged with their teachers. So it's also a chance for us to share promising practice across the network about students' experiences, and to also help them if they wished to stay on in college, just explaining the process. Because if nobody in their family has been to college, they're going to be looking to schools to help them understand what they need to do for that. The pledge not only acknowledges that there are barriers, but it also seeks to widen participation and inclusion, particularly in higher education. Our commitment as part of the pledge, our promise, is to advocate for our voices and experiences to be heard within public services and society. And I think the pledge and FFT do a really good job of that. So if you get a chance to look on the website of FFT, they've got some fabulous resources. Currently, there are 40 schools. I think there are more now, aren't there, Emma?
Oh, it's nearly 50 now, actually.
Now, see, I've got to keep up to date with things. And also, not to put you on the spot, Lindsay, but I would like to highlight, I hope you're here, Lindsay. Lindsay from Castleton School is the first school in Rochdale to sign, so very big welcome to you. Very big welcome. And we have 21 higher education institutions that are signatory to the pledge. Together, we're all committed to learn and share best practice. I really hope that you're going to join us on our journey to continue creating and implementing safe and inclusive environments for students and staff. This is a bit of a a bit of a downer using data, but like I said, I still think that there are high achievers and higher numbers who just choose not to self-identify. In the UK education system, GRT students are ranked as the lowest achieving ethnic group and the least likely to access higher education, with just 6.9% of Gypsy Roma and 10.7% of Irish travellers in higher education. That's in 2019, so I appreciate we're a few more years down the line. Research commissioned by King's College London's Widening Participation Department stated that low uptake of GRT students progressing into higher education continues to remain low over time compared to their non-GRT counterparts. And whilst I appreciate, again, we're a few years on from 2017, data continues to reflect that pattern. Although recently there has been an increase in GRT students in higher education, which I think is really positive and is testament to the fact that education at compulsory age is working in order to fulfil the requirements to apply and be accepted into university. I still think there's lots of work to be done. Low uptake of higher education, I think, is most likely impacted by events at compulsory school age. Here's some data, which I can share the slides if you want, and you can look at the data in your own time. But really, I wanted to just highlight that from the years 2018 right through to 2021-22, the suspension rate and permanent exclusion rate for Gypsy, Roma and travellers of Irish heritage remains higher compared to other ethnic groups and white British students. Despite the best intentions of parents, sometimes parents will remove their children, and I see this not just in my work, I'm going back a few years now, but it is still a thing in traveller education services, but also in other work that I do. Families, if their children are being bullied or they're having a really difficult time at school for a variety of different reasons, really the most natural reaction is to want to protect your children and keep them safe. And sometimes if there's not a good relationship and engagement is not great with the school, parents can remove their children, which I think is very often a last resort when other things have failed. As a result of that, children either miss education completely or there's an inequality of education and they're not having the same childhood experience as their peers. I think that this adds to intersecting disadvantages related to lower levels of literacy. On a social and emotional level, I think it evokes feelings of rejection and perceptions by parents and children that they're not really welcome at school and that they feel disadvantaged by the fact that they are travellers. There's a wide sense of rejection, and that was something that came across in a meeting I just attended by a young girl who's 30 now, still young. Her experience of school is that she just felt unwanted and rejected by the other children, and that really the staff, they didn't know how to deal with it. So her parents took her out of school, and I think that's a failure. Yeah, it's a failure, sadly. What's next for the pledge? For the pledge, I personally will continue to promote the benefits of education and for educational institutions to sign up. I'd like to see the pledge embedded in education compulsory, because I feel like there's sometimes a lack of understanding. I'd like us to seek good history about GTRS people within the national curriculum, and if traveller children aren't in school, they don't get to witness that they are talked about in the national curriculum. Okay, I've talked lots and lots. I'm going to pass over to Emma. There are some links here if you want to find out more. Please sign up or click on these links and do a little bit more reading. Emma, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to say on the link, the first link, which is the Schools Pledge, which is what we're talking about today, there's lots of really useful resources for schools. Like there's a reading list, long book list that of suitable books for school libraries. There's a link to the Anti-Bullying Alliance's Gypsy and Traveller bullying. It's an online learning. I think it's about an hour. There's a link to our online learning. These are 2 cultural awareness trainings. There's just loads of links. There's little films, like Travellers Times have made a film about the history of Gypsy, Romani Gypsy people from India to the UK over 500 to 1,000 years. So it's just like loads of really useful links, and also the working group for the Schools Pledge, which Esther and I are both members of, includes showmen, boaters, Roma people, Irish travellers. So, we've got a lot to offer, and we're always looking to develop, what we offer. So, yeah, just hope you'll consider signing up. Yeah, and that's it from me.
Thank you
And
so
also,
much.
any questions? Sorry, I was just going to say, if you've got any questions, or me and Esther are here to answer any questions you might have today.
Thank you so much to Esther and to Emma for that really informative introduction to the pledge. I've spoken to lots and lots of schools about the pledge in the last few months. I know that lots of schools are really interested in signing up to it, so I really hope that that has given a flavour of what it's about. And yeah, if you need any further information, don't hesitate to contact me. And also follow the links. There's loads of information on the website. We've got information about it on Rochdale Engage. So please sign up to the pledge. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions or any just points of discussion following on from that? No. I'd just like to ask if Esther or Emma could just talk about, if you are going to sign up to the pledge and you want more support, what kind of support can you offer our schools around once they've signed up to the pledge? What's on offer as far as support?
Well, all the schools are on an email group, so we regularly email that group, whether it's like World Fun Fair Month, alerting people, here's World Fun Fair Month, here's some resources, or Gypsy and Traveller History Month in June, here's some resources, and here's a competition you can enter. But also we are reactive to what the group might want. For instance, one of the heads emailed me about problems they've been having with Ofsted over their attendance. They felt they were penalised because they had bad attendance, and they had a lot of traveller families, but the families loved the school. The relationship was brilliant. So I said, we Ofsted sit on the Department for Education stakeholders group, so I could approach them to have a meeting. And then we did hold a meeting. Every school that signed up to the pledge was invited, and lots of those schools came, and we had a really frank and honest and hopefully informative for Ofsted discussion about the matter. So, we're receptive if there's anything that schools want to happen, to try and make that happen.
Thank you. And I suppose really what you were saying then, it's about creating a network as well, where schools can support each other, especially if we have a few schools in Rochdale that sign up. We can definitely look at creating a network for those schools to support each other.
And yeah, another thing that schools might want to do, whether they sign up or not, is join the ACERT. For instance, ACERT, which is the Advisory Council for the Education of Romani and Other Travellers, they have quarterly traveller education practitioner network meetings, and Esther and I attend those, and they're very useful. A lot of people from traveller education services go, but individual school staff members are welcome to go. And again, it's a network of sharing. They have an annual conference, sharing good practice, discussing topical issues in education.
Yeah, and I think it's really great to bring those ideas of good practice from various different sources all together into one area where we can put them all into practice in schools. Does anybody? Oh, go on, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to echo what Emma said, really. I think that one of the things that I enjoy working on the pledge is that it is a network of sharing resources, sharing promising practice. If there's an interesting report that's been released, I've learnt about things that way that I probably would have missed otherwise. So it's good to share different things like that. And it's good, especially around History Month. You can see all the activities that are going on. And yeah, I think the network is something that schools can benefit from.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any other questions for Emma, Esther, or for myself?
Can I just add a tiny point to that? Yes, with the resources issue, you know, something we're passionate about is having the Roma Holocaust covered on the curriculum, on the national curriculum as compulsory. And while the Department for Education don't look to be making it compulsory, you know, there's other ways to actually get that onto schools' curriculum, and we're amassing a wealth of resources with links on our website again. So, you know, we'll share that and ask schools, could you, you know, it'd be great if you would mark the Roma Holocaust when you mark Holocaust Memorial Day and include that experience. So yeah, we have got access to those, because then, you know, if people are saying, but we don't have the resources, then we can point that way. So
it's really great to have. I mean, we have some resources within the local authority, but to have another point of access to different resources is really, really great. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, I know you're all very, very busy people, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I just want to thank Esther and Emma once again. I think it was really informative, really great presentation, and I hope that it's going to encourage lots of our schools in Rochdale to sign up to the pledge. And Lindsay, thank you for signing up already. Thank you, everybody.